Shine a spotlight on tax season.
I love tax season.
It is time. And we want to talk about the best strategy for refunds.
Yeah, joining us now is BookSmarts accounting CEO, Jenny Groberg, to help everyone with some tax tips here. So I guess today we're going to be talking about the pros and cons of, getting a refund, or maybe trying to break even, or maybe even owing a little bit at tax time. Okay, so first of all, let's just start right at the top here. What should your goal be?
Okay, so before we talk about whether it's better to underpay or overpay, let me just kind of deconstruct how this looks, right?
Okay.
When you get hired, you fill out a W-9 and you put how many exemptions you have. So if you want a lot of taxes taken out, you'd put a 0 or a 1 or a very low amount of exemptions. If you don't want the government to take out very much in taxes, you claim a ton of exemptions. Let's say you have 5 kids, you get 5 exemptions for your kids, 1 for yourself, or whatever. Okay, so the fewer exemptions you have, the more taxes they're going to take out. So it's kind of a game. So if consistently every year you're getting a refund, you probably have too few exemptions.
So you really do want to try to break even, right?
You do want to break even.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll talk about the pros and cons of overpaying and underpaying, and you can decide. But in my opinion, you want to make sure that you're as close to that line as you can.
You don't want to get a big check back.
No.
Because that means they've been using your money instead of letting you use your money, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so let's talk about the pros of overpaying your taxes. The pros are you have no interest, no penalties owing, there's, no surprises, but some of the problems is that you have given the IRS an interest-free loan and you don't have that money in your pocket.
Well, the government needs the money now.
Yeah, they do need the money. It's
Yes,
true.
we're trying to reduce the deficit, right?
Yeah, so some of the cons would be that money could be used for debt payments, it could be used for expenses. You could be using that money for a high interest savings account where you're accruing the interest. So those are kind of some of the cons of giving the IRS too much money throughout the year.
Okay, should you talk to your HR person, or can you go do this on your own?
You absolutely should. A lot of times, payroll companies, I have a payroll company, you can log in and you can change the
I
exemptions
think you
yourself.
can adjust that any time.
Okay.
Yeah, or you can go to your HR specialist and you can say, hey, I want fewer exemptions or more exemptions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
For a lot of years now, I've been getting big refunds, which I really like.
I know.
But I've known that it's probably better to invest that money yourself instead of just waiting for it to come back.
So what you could do on that line is you could say, every time I get a paycheck, maybe you have a separate high yield savings account. Like American Express offers a really high yield savings account. You can say, I want you to deduct my account twice a month on payday or the day after, and have that money be set aside so that you're not even thinking about it. It's not with all of your other checking and savings accounts, but it's a separate account if you want to earn the interest instead of the government. That could be a strategy. You just really have to be careful. In my opinion, sometimes people will say, I love getting a refund. It's the best, right?
It's trip money.
It's like
It's
Christmas.
trip money.
Yeah.
I can use it for credit card debt. I can use it for household expenses or whatever. The problem is if you are paying credit card debt, it's kind of a signal that there's bigger underlying financial issues. And one tax refund's not going to solve that.
Right.
You're going to just perpetuate that behavior throughout the year. So you really have to make sure you're drilling down and finding out what that emotion is behind the financial spend, and make sure that you're strategizing correctly so that you're not just relying on your refund, which may or may not happen, to pay those big expenses. You should be saving and making sure that you've got that in your pocket.
Your paycheck will be a little bit bigger because that money's not going.
Right. So your
IRS.
cash flow will be better. Okay, so let's talk about the pros of maybe having more money in your pocket and paying less upfront. So the pros would be you have more cash flow because you have more of your paycheck coming to you. You are going to maybe have more interest that you can accrue yourselves. The cons are maybe you're underpaying, right? And then maybe you're going to end up with a tax bill. Maybe you can't handle the stress. So you really need to be planning. Like right now, you can kind of find out what you're owing and where your place is. How do things look this year, and then strategize for next year and make sure that you're on target.
It's probably too late to do anything for this tax season, but
Right.
for the following year. For this
I mean,
year.
if you're self-employed, you have to make sure that you're saving. You know, I'm self-employed, my husband's self-employed, so percentage of every check, just without question, that goes into a separate account.
Sure.
And I don't ever touch that just to make sure that I don't get behind on my taxes.
Right.
And I have that throughout the year, so if I'm making payments in September and January, I have it and it's ready to go. So if you're self-employed, you have to make sure that you're setting that aside. And I would say you're setting aside even more just so that you don't get caught with a huge tax
It's a big
bill.
hit
It's a
when
big
it
hit.
comes up.
Yeah.
Self-employed.
Yeah.
My sister is self-employed, and I think she pays quarterly. Can
Okay.
you do that? Can you set it up where you can do that?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's even better. Yeah.
Make sure you put it aside, though.
Yeah.
Just like all the other insurance. And
Exactly.
Stuff, you make sure you
Yeah.
have it, so
Yeah.
you don't get hit with fees. And what risk do you have of getting fees?
Okay, so let's say that you underpay your taxes. So you can get hit with an 8% interest penalty. So if you've underpaid, your target should be 90% of your taxable income you should be paying quarterly taxes on.
Okay.
So if you're way off, then you can be accruing penalties. So the hope is that you're pretty close to that 90% mark. If you've underpaid significantly or you don't make those quarterly tax payments on time, you can get hit with an 8% interest, 0.25% penalty per day.
Per day.
It's compounded daily up to 25%, and then they can slap you with an underpayment penalty on top of it.
Wow.
So it's pretty significant. So if you're not quite sure, hire a professional to help you deconstruct this, help you plan. And if you really let's say you really don't save, then maybe you lower your exemptions, have more taken out, and then you get a tax refund. That's assuming that you don't accumulate other credit card debt and you don't have other issues. But again, really the hope is that you're breaking even. You're not giving the government too much money. You're accruing the interest and earning that yourselves. You have the cash flow, but you want to be pretty close to break even where you're not getting a huge refund and you're not paying a ton. Yeah.
Okay, and tax professionals can help you a lot
Yes.
too.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah. What about TurboTax, those types of
Yeah,
things?
that's
that's a good
great.
question.
The more complicated your taxes, the more K1s you have, the more business entities, the more strategy you need. It might make more sense to hire a professional. TurboTax is great if your taxes are pretty simple, but I always recommend hiring a professional because they're going to see things you don't, and you might pay $800 for a tax return or maybe $1,000 depending on how complicated your taxes are, but they'll save you more than that in taxes.
Could save you more.
Yeah. Is the IRS very reasonable in trying to negotiate?
So from my
issues?
experience, the state of Utah is very hard to dispute penalties and interest. The IRS is actually a lot better at, let's say you have one mishap or one mistake and you ask for, those penalties to be zeroed out, then sometimes they'll work with you.
Okay.
But I feel like the state of Utah has pretty low tolerance. So you got to keep your nose clean.
We have to behave.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jenny,
All right,
thanks so much.
yeah,
Always
some
great advice.
Great information.
Yeah, you got
And, all right,